Hey, welcome to Vlog Day 21. Today I'm going to talk hopefully very quickly about a topic that's inspired by a book I'm reading at the moment. And the book is called The 80-20 Principle. The 80-20 Principle is a law or a rule which states that there is not an even relationship between our inputs and our outputs. Now, it's something that's proven in many fields like economics, agriculture, business, education, various other things. It can be known as Pareto's law as well, and it's something that a few people know about, but maybe not everybody knows about. So I was trying to share it today in case it was useful for you. So like I said, it says that there is not an even relationship between our inputs and outputs, which I think a lot of the time we like to think there is. We like to think that there's a kind of a linear relationship in the things we do and what we get from it. But this law, as I said, proven in various areas, shows that there is not. And it can be expressed in different ways. So, one way of looking at it, for example, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with, is the idea that a large amount of the world's wealth, say the top 80-90% of the world's wealth, is owned by just 5 to 10% of the population. Now, it's important here, although the rule in the book is called the 80-20 principle, it's important to say that it's not two numbers that add up to 100. It's when two things that have a relationship, that both have their own 100% scale, do not have an equal relationship. So, for example, in business, it might say that 80% of your profits are generated by just 30% of your products. Or it might say that 75% of your sales come from just 10% of your customers. It's applicable in other parts of life as well. So most of us have had the experience of working on a project. Let's say we had, several weeks to do a project, and we find that the majority of the work, or the most important parts of the work, are often done in the last few days before the deadline. Now, that's a natural thing. Part of it is to do with the time pressure, which is actually a different law, which I might get to at another point. But it's also natural that it's not going to be the case that, let's say, out of the 100% of time we spend on a project, that every percentage of that time corresponds to a percentage of, the project being completed. I'm going to try and draw an example from my own life here. So I've been using this principle a little bit in language learning recently. If you followed the blog, you'll know that I am trying to learn Spanish. I gave myself a target to learn as much as I could in 30 days, and I've tried to keep track, of how well I'm doing. Now, it's very likely that I'm going to carry on learning after that period. But I really wanted to see how far I could get quickly. And part of that was because when I was growing up in England, I had to learn a second language. In my case, it was French, and I studied French for about 6 or 7 years. But the way that language learning was at that time in this country meant that it wasn't very intensive learning. I don't think it was very well structured, and it certainly didn't focus on the most productive tasks, the most effective tasks all the time. So I spent a long time learning French, years learning French, and I'm already more confident using Spanish in a conversation in less than a month than I would be trying to speak to somebody in French. So how is that possible? Well, I took the time to have a look at some of the things I could do in the shortest amount of time that would maximize my results. One of those things I've done is try to focus on learning the 1,000 most commonly used words in the Spanish language. Now, obviously, Spanish is an enormous language. There's probably several 100,000 words, and if you go into scientific terms and technical terms and all that sort of stuff, maybe even more than that. It's going to be very difficult, in fact, probably impossible, to get close to learning that many words. In fact, a native speaker might although they might know more than 20,000 words, they can typically only use somewhere between 10 and 20,000 words. For me, the reason to focus on 1,000 words is that the most commonly used 1,000 words actually account for about 70% of the words that are mostly used in conversation. Now, the percentages, if you learn more than that, say if you go up to 2,000 to 3,000 words, you can probably bring your knowledge of the language or knowledge of general conversation up to about 80%. 5,000 words, you might start getting up into 85 or the late 80s in terms of percentages, but the returns diminish. At a certain point, you can learn more and more words, but you're not massively increasing the percentage of words you understand in a conversation. So it's very much about trying to focus our energies on the most productive way of learning, the most productive tasks, the most effective and efficient methods. And this could be used in anything, like learning an instrument. So, for example, if you wanted to learn an instrument, you would find out that a lot of the most common pop songs, a lot of the most common tunes that everybody would know are actually made up of a very limited number of chords. So if you wanted to learn an instrument, you wanted to learn how to play a song on that instrument, you should just focus on a certain number of actions, which would be learning those few chords you needed to learn, and perhaps a little bit of the technique of playing, whether it, if it's a guitar, strumming, or if it's a wind instrument, how you blow through it, and all those sorts of things. But don't try and learn everything. If your goal is to try and learn a song, maybe you don't want to worry too much about learning all the scales, because we don't want to waste our time, or at least if we do want to waste our time, we want to waste it on things that we enjoy doing, things that we want to waste our time on. If there's something that we either are trying to achieve, or if there's something that we have to do, I would think that most of us will be looking for the most effective, the most efficient, the quickest way of achieving that, of hitting our targets. So that's it. Check it out by all means, the 80-20 principle. I'm on my second or third reading, I'm not sure now, and it's it's something that I've used before, and I find it really, really helpful. Hopefully it's helpful to you, and obviously, hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks.